speak a lot about gratitude these days. Most of the discussion focuses on being thankful for what we have as individuals. However, there's little discussion on having collective gratitude for living in Canada. On this NSP Short, Peter MacKay shares a few thoughts on this issue. I did a podcast with a gentleman who is an Afghan living in Toronto named Shoaib Rahim. Fascinating story. And he said something I thought was really important. He said, this thing we have in Canada is wonderful, but it's fragile. Yeah. He said, just like a pane of glass. He said, when it breaks, trying to put it back together is exceedingly difficult. So you want to do everything you can to make sure that you make that as anti-fragile, as robust as possible, because putting the pieces back together afterwards is far more difficult than avoiding the breakage in the first place.
Well, and that's very prescient, and I suspect that Afghan gentleman, having grown up in Afghanistan and lived through, if he's roughly our age, the invasion of the Russians in the 80s, the external pressures from Pakistan to Iran, and the more recent conflict and return of the Taliban, he would have a much, much greater appreciation of what life could be, living under a totalitarian regime or having seen your country invaded and being at war. And that seems unthinkable. But there are people, veterans, very few of them now, most centurions, who went off to war as young people. And the history books, are sometimes forgotten. I think there are a lot of lessons of history that we are in danger of forgetting, or at least not heeding to the extent that we should. And it is very, very personal. I just, had a flashback memory of being at a school in Afghanistan where some of these girls that I spoke of earlier, who we were trying to help provide an education system, and, many of them hadn't been in school for a decade, and they were, 15 years old. And this one little girl who was, a little older than my daughter, and just was stunning. She had these effervescent green eyes, and all of the girls were so excited that we were there that day visiting, because they wanted to showcase, clearly their teachers or principal had told them, these are the Canadians who, made this school possible. And so they wanted to show what they were learning, and the classroom environment was just, vibrating with excitement. And this little girl, through a translator, told me, I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do with your education? She said, I want to be a teacher. She said, I go back to my little village every day, and I get emotional thinking about it. She said, I teach the other kids what I learned that day. And some of them were taking 2 and 3 years of a curriculum in a single year. Like, they were just so intensely focused on bettering themselves. It was like they'd been in the desert. They were so thirsty for knowledge. They wanted to just soak it all up. And I remember thinking, when I saw everything collapsing and the evacuation out of Kabul, like, where's that little girl? Her name was Anastasia, and just think of all of those kids. And that's what's at stake. That, not to be melodramatic about it, but those are the things that can happen when civility completely departs.